says, you're a natural problem solver. Yes. Strategist. INTJ, strategist, come on. And a leader. And for me, it's like, I've always sort of felt like I was a leader, even as a kid, but I didn't lead. And so I started to think, I'm not the leading type. I'm good at leading when it's time for me to lead. Mm-hmm. And that started to form into something else too. And I I defined that. I thought that was me. I thought authentic me is lead when necessary. And it was like that for my childhood. It's like a group situations. You're put in a group, there's a leader. Sometimes they're assigned, whatever. But you could always tell the person that's going to lead, like ENTJ, ESTJ, I'm sure, or something like this. Yep. Or even an ESTP. I don't know, an extrovert. And I was reluctant. So what would happen is you'd get a group of I guess it was just a bunch of introverts that had either didn't care or didn't want to participate. So those are the cases where well, my grade matters so much to me. I need to take the reins. So I would lead in those cases. But I realized I don't dislike it. In fact, I prefer it. I prefer to lead. I prefer to control things. And I think it's not just that I prefer it, but I know that's my role as a strategic person. However, if there's a person that's better than me at leading and we're in a group, whatever, whether it's a company or not, if I have a shared vision with that person, I am more than happy to be their lead strategy, the person that helps them with strategy, because they're probably just teeing their butts off. And then I'm there all right, let's look, I can see a couple steps ahead. Where we're headed is good, but this is better. And so that's where I think I would be fine in those types of scenarios. I'm thinking of Alex and Layla Hormozi, ENTJ, INTJ respectively. And she is the CEO of their company, but I feel like he's the one, he's like a bull, he just keeps charging forward. And I feel like she's what keeps him in check. Because otherwise I feel like he would, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I feel like he would do really well, but I feel like he does better because of her, or thanks to her, however you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. That being said, back to where we were. Yeah. So I'm just going to get through this part, and then I don't know if yours works like mine does.
Okay.
I just really want to finish these points here. So what's important though, as I guess maybe because I'm introverted, I'm not sure, but well, first of all, it says people project expectations onto you. So when you read that at first, when you hear that, it's okay, well, what does that mean? Doesn't everyone do that? Is what I thought. And I don't know. So it says it told me why. And I was now I get it. I am seen as a fixer, the person who fixes things. So this to me is a responsibility I don't really like. What I mean by this is, it's like when I'm in a company. So if I'm not the person running things, I'm the go-to guy when the idiots that are in charge mess up, is what that sounds like to me. And I've had this happen a lot, because it's they're recognizing my strategic abilities, but they're not recognizing it monetarily or position-wise or role-wise in the company, or just generally respect-wise. And so this is what I find poor about certain hierarchies or certain companies that I've worked for. And that's why those no longer, I just stopped doing it. I just became my own boss. And now I'm branching further and further away from that into trying to build a company where I am at the top, if there is a top. The closest to what a top is, or the person who's in charge of strategizing and leading. Mm-hmm. So that way, if people do come to me, it's well, of course you did, because this is me, this is my company. So I thought that was weird, and I was okay, but that does make sense. That has happened to me. So people project their expectations onto me, and they ask me to fix stuff for them.
Okay,
has happened a lot. Because of this though, and because of being a leader, of course, you need to be careful about your reputation. I thought, that's interesting. It's telling me that, because I'm already doing that. I'm always somewhat worried about my reputation. Now, this does seem slightly hypocritical, because I will have SE outbursts, extroverted sensing outbursts, where it's does this guy even care what people thinks about him? That's kind of when I feel like my reputation is not at stake. Because my reputation matters in the places I decide matter, like company, or this podcast. I'm not going to just take off my shirt randomly or something. That would ruin my reputation, right? Or maybe never letting James speak. That would ruin my reputation. We'll get there in just a second. So it says people may idolize or reject me based on their expectations of me. So again, that's people projecting their expectations on me. And I think we do that to leaders. We do that to, these days, content creators, or I always forget the word, Influencers. I always want to say entertainers because to me it's like, are they really influencing or are they just entertaining? Is it both? So that's fascinating. So I get that. And of course, you seek deep knowledge. Now, people think that I don't do that as an INTJ. That's not true. When I'm doing something, I seek deep knowledge in that at that time. I don't retain it at all. Yeah. SI 8th, and doesn't matter SI or not, I don't care. So that's why it happens. I just know that I actively don't want to keep stuff in my head. Yeah. And it basically is telling me that I should balance my solitude, because that's what I think is fascinating. So I'm a 5-1. The 1 is almost like the introverted needs solitude number, and the 5 is my public image. So I have to balance my alone time with my public image. So that says to me, show yourself well when you do it, but also make sure you make time for yourself. And in those cases, do whatever you want because you're not in the public eye. So when in the public eye, make yourself look good. So I'll stop there because this was really, really powerful to me and really, really not motivating, but reinforcing. Because it's like, I don't know. It's weird to me because like, what is this? It's a profile. You said somebody had an awakening.
It came to him. It essentially came to him in a dream. That's what he said. And he combined many different esoteric teachings. Esoteric meaning like just passed down from the generations, and it was like it's like mystical. There's the I Ching in Taoism, and astrology. And he put them all together and he presented it saying, hey, this is the system to understand yourself called human design.
I guess what's fascinating to me is it's like you don't need to know the person to apply a profile.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
You're like, don't tell me anything about yourself. In fact, except for when were you born and where, because I'm going to tell you everything about you. Uh-huh. That seems wrong. And that's why I think I like it. It's not logical.
Yeah. I would love to explore that idea more because in a future podcast, because I feel like our discoveries in a larger sense, when I say almost like scientific, is we're discovering that to say the phrase right, just the one phrase I'm thinking about is everything is connected to everything. There are no separate accidents. So when you look at the latest discoveries in science, you see like, oh, of course, the positions of the stars is related to me as well because everything is connected to everything. I would love to talk about that because that's a topic I think is really interesting. But shall we talk about my profile a little bit?
Yeah, because I don't even know if like what I explained already even describes what 5 and 1 is. So yeah, it doesn't. So like that's just my intro to that's the overall profile.
Well, yes, and what I see is an outer and inner persona. When you are out with the world, you are trailblazing a new path and making yourself a model, an image. And then when you're alone, you are just like researching deep into the thing that you are moving towards.
You're right.
That's what I see.
And I actually do see it is sort of drawn together. So that plus, so fifth line, 5, makes you magnetic. So that's what I talked about. People are drawn to me for whatever reason to get something. So it says people are drawn to you as a guide, guiding them through some path. And that is what we described earlier about me helping people, etc. Mm-hmm. And that's the same role I take in my professional life as well. Then the first line ensures that your guidance, so the previous aforementioned guidance, is well-researched and practical, which again, sounds like me. Practical, TE. And then lastly, you thrive when you have the right audience. Now this is interesting to me because it is true. And it actually, which we haven't finished, I started to talk to you about something we did on Friday, and I didn't exactly finish what I was saying, and I didn't really explain why I felt a certain way. And I think this might speak to it somewhat.
Yeah.
You thrive when you have the right audience, but wrong invitations can lead to burnout or bitterness. I felt extremely tired, and I felt somewhat bitter afterwards. And I think it was because it just wasn't the right invitation for me. Right? And yeah, it's like, I think as an INTJ, it's also speaks to my time is valuable. It's the most valuable commodity I have. I don't find myself in the right places. I might want to either reconsider my attendance, if you will, or I don't know, just think like, hey, this is not, you don't need to be burnt out or bitter, actually, I think. I think I can sort of fight against it. It's just, I don't have to take on the role that I normally would take on. I can just be there and experience it. I mean, that's kind of what I did. I was very quiet. I don't know if you even noticed. I barely talked. Yeah.
So I found the 6-2 profile very accurate because it combines these two things that I've really taken to right now. 6 is role model. My life happens in 3 phases. Learning from my mistakes from 0 to 30 years old. And about that, I've done right around 24, and even before that, I've looked into ways to convince myself to do many experiments. And one of them was Toastmasters. I did a blog. I had a phase where I was doing screams in public places. So I was like expanding my mind as much as I could. And then actually right around when I was 30 years old, I moved here to Korea.
Just how does screaming in public places expand one's mind? That's interesting.
Yeah, well,
I could see it as being a stress release and probably giving stress to anyone that was around, but...
Well, the thesis I was seeking to teach myself was it might capture attention for that moment, but if you wait 5 seconds afterwards, it's as if it didn't happen.
Try having inferior SE and then tell me if that's how it works.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't let it go for the rest of the day. But yeah, that's interesting. I was just curious, like what was the motive? I'm not judging it. I mean, I am internally, but
yeah. Well, that was me breaking out into just full-on ability to do NE as an INTP, extrovert intuition, just experiment, because my observation has been that no matter how I experiment, most people will forget very fast.
I mean, now I'm picturing, what if every person on Earth did that?
Well, that's true. Well,
did it constantly.
There's a reason why there are only a certain portion of the population is NP.
So all of the INTPs just sitting in their houses or going outside and screaming. That would be funny.
Yeah. So the second stage in the role model here is stepping back and gaining perspective. And I just turned 36, and I have really just like been in this consolidation phase of my life for my 30s. And so that's quite well aligned. And then the last phase here, 50 plus, what it says is becoming a true guide and role model, which was interesting to think about, like what that will look like in the future. But I feel like we're doing that right now. We're stepping into that. So that's the 6 line. The 2 line here is hermit, naturally talented but prefers solitude, needs alone time to recharge and develop mastery. Others often recognize their gifts before they do. And that's also something that I've really owned up to and decided to step into, where, I mean, I've stepped away from like a traditional job as we've talked about, and I've really stepped into almost both of these roles, 6 being a role model and being a hermit. I have amassed a large number of books at home that I tend to read. That's one of my main priorities. And then the other thing we're doing is we're meeting with people and providing them with clarity and information about who they are and what they like, how they can understand the world from a MBTI lens. And I really feel I am stepping into what this profile is talking about, almost like holistically, like with abandon. that's
with reckless abandon.
I mean, it feels right. It feels right, and I'm going by gut. But from a conventional lens, it looks reckless. I'm sure it looks reckless, but I've really almost like violently moved into this 6-2 profile recently. Like at home, I have all these books, like my day is largely unstructured, unplanned, and my priority is reading my books, reflecting upon them, sharing the information that I've come to understand. That's my 2 line here. And then when the time comes for us to run the next meeting or meet with people, I say what comes to mind to say, and people, it's very interesting to think of, to consider, to see how people take it, because what I've come to understand is what I say is not anything they've heard before, and it like enters into their mind and it percolates and it causes all kinds of chain reactions, and then they realize something later. So like I say it to them, and then the reaction generally I've gotten in my life is silence, and then later on, like complete change. So that's been my observation.
I've had similar things as well, or observations. Like I also will say something and I'm like, they don't really respond, but I can tell. I just know. I mean, I'm using my intuition to tell me that, you know, what I'm telling them, whether they accept it or not, whether they even like, because they will take it negatively, I think at first, or they just go away from me.
Yeah.
And I guess as long as I'm not offended by that. I know in myself that, you know, I have provided that service to them, and, you know, whether that's introverted ethics or not, or feeling, because we've talked about how that's on an individual basis. I can't help but think that when one person changes, the people around them change as well. So it's to me a very indirect effect, ripple effect. Mm-hmm. And so that's why even if I have quote unquote trickster FE, I don't think it matters if I don't have to do it. I think if I can strategically like formulate the things I say and do and to the person, and it's customized for them, it doesn't matter. You know, I think it will do what it's meant to do. It'll do all of the other functions I'm not good at, or create that.
Yeah, and the image that comes to mind for me is the grain of sand placed into the oyster. Like I see almost parent TE can often be quite abrasive. It's going to say like a harsh truth that a lot of people don't want to hear, but they also needed to hear it.
Yeah.
And it'll like abrade on them and like cause all kinds of pain in the moment. But then it'll also somewhat sink in and I'll be like, Derek was right. Well, I don't even know if they would.
It'll be subconscious most of the time, I believe. They won't know that they won't even know that what I said ever affected them, maybe. And that's fine.
Yeah. So they might not associate it with you, but it has entered into the collective consciousness of their mind.
Yeah, like, because I spoke to FE just now, but I'm talking about like when I say something, when I ask a question, or whatever, I say something, NE also it feeds NE a lot of the time as well.
Yeah.
You know, they just start thinking subconsciously or consciously, or whatever, about what I said, and they start exploring other things they wouldn't have looked at.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where it's like the definitive or the narrowing nature of NI is not always it's never a bad thing. Well, yeah. To me it isn't. And so that's where, again, it's like, I don't need to have this pride in my hero function or any of my functions, because I know that as long as I believe in myself and trust myself and respect myself and my beliefs, then I know that I'm going to go the right direction. Like, I'm not going to say these things to every person I meet. They're all, I say customized, but I read the situation, I look and read between the lines, I make my connections, and then I say what I feel is necessary. You can tell the difference between when I'm just saying something randomly or I'm saying something that's useful too. I say a lot of stupid things. Those are not what I'm talking about. Those can be ignored. But when I'm focused and I really care about what's going on there, that happens. And that speaks to my one, right? The investigative nature. It's also, like I said, it's like being deeply curious and research oriented, but it's also, to me, it's like that knowledge that I'm seeking isn't like, when I hear knowledge or learn something, I picture books and the internet. No, I'm talking about people. I learn people. Knowledge for me comes from people. It comes from real life situations using extroverted sensing. That doesn't come from books. In fact, I don't believe in books most of the time. These are just words. To me, it's like, if I'm trying to build a new reality, I need to build it off of this one, not on something from the past. So, whatever that says to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I hear in what you just said is that is one vision that I see, is that if everyone were able to step into their authenticity and express themselves fully, then conceptually you can almost see that each person becomes like this like abundant flowing stream of information, and the people that are like the ones that can hear that information now have the input they need to fully execute on their own authenticity as well. So a fully activated INTJ will activate many NPs out there as well, and they'll go and be like, you think that way, but I think this way, almost. Like it'd be like it's just a chain reaction of intuition.
And a lot of times I know this. Like I know what I'm doing. I come off as like very just either random or like whatever. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but like I sometimes I find that it's, for me, like, we don't talk about ourselves a lot. We don't talk about what our thinking processes are and stuff. Like, the only reason why I'm doing this is for what we're doing. But the reason for me that I keep this stuff to myself is that sometimes I feel it's better that you get the message that I'm trying to transmit and nothing else, unadulterated.
Mm-hmm.
And when I start giving you more noise and give you and start feeding you, or you start judging me more, or judging me in a different way because of something I shared that I feel like I shouldn't have shared, then it changes the message. This is very NI. You notice the difference? A moment ago I was speaking very clearly because I knew what I wanted to say. This one's more philosophical, so it's difficult to explain. So you can see a vast difference between NI and T-led NI. I'm just trying to say that enigmatic nature, or is it esoteric, whatever, nature of an INTJ, it's not a bad thing. It's by design.
Yeah.
And in order to build that trustworthiness, or to become that 5 line that in mine, the person that people go to, I believe that the way I behave and my reputation, like as we mentioned, is important, and I build that by behaving a certain way at all times when I'm in an extroverted world. When I'm at home, my God, I'm a different person, or when I'm with friends. So like a lot of what you'll see, especially as we get closer, is like none of that's what you talked about in our podcast, or none of that's what I see when you talk to other people, because it won't be. It's a slightly more introverted experience when you're with people that are close to you as an INTJ. Yeah. I mean, it's just a little bit about myself, I guess. I do find these profiles fascinating, and I don't know if you have more you want to wrap up, but I just think it's really made me think like, okay.
Yeah.
I am who I am.
I want to add one thing, which is it gave me some reassurance that I am not just throwing everything away because this 6-2 profile, it looks quite unconventional for life when it comes to the lifestyles of the world. Being a hermit and an experiment and then living experiments, but it's almost like I almost feel like Jonah. Like I feel like I've strayed from the path and then I've come back onto the path. It feels very good, even though conventionally it probably doesn't look like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So
I immediately would say, though, confidence is something that would be better. You did what you did before knowing this profile.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you had the confidence. And I feel by you letting this be your confidence is somewhat inauthentic.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean,
a reassurance is one thing.
Yeah.
But having that be like, well, like anytime someone questions you, or even if you start to question yourself and you say, well, yeah, but my profile, that I feel is not.
I'm not saying that. I'm not doing that. It is an echo. It is
Sure.
it is something that like aligning me to what I have chosen.
So what I really
So-
was trying to say was not pointing at you. I imagine this would happen to. I'm just imagining this will happen to many, many people, just like MBTI probably does.
Yep.
And that's probably why some people choose to be different MBTIs than other ones, because they're not being authentic and they're not confident. Confidence, we talked about self-respect. I think when you respect who you are and know who you are, and I can identify who you are, all of this comes full circle. And that is my final regard.
That makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, next time when we will expand upon this, or maybe not next time, but when we desire to finish up on the human design profiles that we found so valuable, tune in then. And with that, this is 2 of 16 with James and Derek. Thank you.